All right, so we're moving on to the 12 o'clock session, Travel and Transcultural Identity, with our readers Eufemia FANTETTI and Rosetta ROSATI, and I will be reading a few poems by Anthony Pignataro, to whom we have dedicated this conference. So let me introduce Eufemia first. Eufemia FANTETTI's short story collection, A Recipe for Disaster and Other Unlikely Tales of Love, was published by Mother Tongue Publishing. It was runner-up for the 2013 Bemuta Lead Literary Award and won the 2014 Bressani Prize for Short Fiction. Her work is published in various anthologies, including Conspicuous Accents, Fish, and Exploring Voice. Eufemia FANTETTI. Grazie, Licia. Okay. Good morning, o come diciamo a Molise, buongiorno. I know everybody already said thank you, but I want to offer my thanks too. Grazie di avermi dato l'opportunità con questa conferenza di ritornare nel paese della mia famiglia. Bene, il mio italiano è finito qui, you won't have to suffer it anymore. I just didn't want to leave you with the wrong impression that I really understood a lot of Italian, but we spoke the dialect all the time in my home, so it was this incredible experience to go back after 36 years to the village that my parents came from and see my father's home. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for this opportunity, that was all the work that was put into putting this conference together, for this opportunity to return home, really. So I'm reading a nonfiction piece, which is actually about the first time I came to Italy when I was 5. So this is my 3rd time in Italy, and all of my earliest memories are from this trip. And in fact, when I went to school, I had to learn English because we spoke the dialect at home. So this is a story about that trip because it's everything that I remember. And the title comes from a prayer that I think was modified by Italian Americans. The prayer was, Saint Anthony, please come down, something is lost and can't be found. So this is called Something is Lost and Can't Be Found. Awake past my bedtime on the overnight Alitalia flight, I scampered around, shouting a repertoire of theme songs from television programs like The Friendly Giant and Mr. Dress-Up. I added lines from a favorite toy commercial. I was performing a medley, stringing the songs together, throwing in a la-la-la to cover the lyrics I'd forgotten. I was dazzling, entertaining, and destined to be famous. This was the Christmas before I turned 5. My father took my mother and me back to Bonefro, their village in Italy. His decision made my mother happy. She'd left as a young bride and was depressed in Toronto, prone to taking out her anger on me, the only child of a pair of mismatched characters whose arranged marriage would be a recipe for misery and madness. I was born to fix the mistake, to diffuse the tension, to disperse the fog of gloom that permeated their home. I threw myself into the role with abandon. Imitating wrestlers on television, running through the backyard, striking poses and yelling, "Tada!" My father indulged me by applauding. My mother shook her head. No one knew where my tendency to burst into song or tears had come from. I was both a tragic thespian and a budding comedian. Aboard the plane, my parents had grown sleepy, but I was restless with excitement. Climbing over my father to freedom and fame, I promised not to wander far as he warned, "Don't be bother anyone." I sashayed up and down the aisle, hanging off of armrests, batting my eyelashes like Darlin in The Little Rascals, blowing kisses to amused passengers. My hard work was finally noticed by my dad. He stuck his arm out and caught me by the waistband of my polyester hip huggers, interrupting my show-stopping finale. "Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street?" Basta, Eufemia, sits down like the good girl. Mama and Eufemia will be upset with you. His comment stopped me cold. "But she's not here," I said. Though I had no memory of her, my paternal grandmother was my hero. I was jittery and jumpy about meeting the woman whose passport photo gaze was kind and loving. I was her namesake, her youngest and last grandchild. "She know everything, includes what's happened on this plane," my father insisted. "Sits and be quiet." My parents often kept my over-the-top theatrics in line by threatening my grandmother's disapproval. I couldn't stomach the thought of letting her down. I crawled back into the spot between my parents, sniffling. I folded my arms across my chest, an imitation of my mother's frustrated with her lot in life pose, and shut my eyes. 2 fidgety minutes later, I was still awake. Turning to look at my sleeping mother in the window seat next to me, I let out an exaggerated vaudevillian sigh. I couldn't fall asleep. I looked back at my father, ready to pester him with questions about his mother's curious abilities, but he'd nodded off. Unlike my mother, my father had been jubilant to escape Bonneifro, in the ancient region of Samnium, home of the Sabines, whose women would always be constantly depicted in Renaissance art in the act of being raped. A place that had resisted Roman rule. According to legend, one of the Samnites who inhabited the region over 2,000 years ago was an ancestor of Pontius Pilate. Gaius Pontius led his army to victory over the Romans. Then, something interesting happened. The Samnite soldiers didn't slaughter the Romans. They embarrassed them. The Romans were stripped of their robes, paraded around wearing yokes, while the Samnites, displaying a stunning lack of foresight, laughed, hurled insults, and cracked jokes. When the Romans returned and won the next war, they wasted no time in games of humiliation, killing Gaius and defeating the army. Some thought this explained our rebellious nature. Maybe this was the root of our troubles. Only one thing was certain. We were all descended from tragedy. I was asleep when we arrived. I woke up in my grandmother's bed to see my Nonna's smiling face leaning over me. She brushed hair away from my forehead and pulled the blankets back. I sat up in her bed as she wrapped her arms around me. I shrank back a little, shoulders hunched, thinking she might not actually like me, a feeling I picked up from my mother. Nonna's hug was fierce and snug. As I breathed in the wood smoke smell of her and the house, I relaxed. She had the saddest smile I had ever seen. That first night in Bonneifro, I stepped forward cautiously and gave my grandfather a kiss on the cheek before heading to my own cot in a tiny corridor. I wouldn't allow anyone but Nonna to take me upstairs. She tucked a St. Anthony prayer card, her cherished patron of lost articles and travelers, into my pillowcase for protection. My grandmother got a cat for our visit because my father had told her I was crazy about them. In Canada, I always chased them meowing, believing they could understand me, thinking I was having conversations in cat tongue. My parents weren't interested in pets. For them, animals were meant to serve a specific purpose: guard the farm, kill the mice, transport the grain, help till the field, be part of the pasta sauce. My father warned me not to approach the feral cats roaming the village and defending their territory. They weren't the friendly Disney aristocrats I'd hoped to befriend. I ran after Nonna's cat, grabbing his tail and holding on hard. Everyone except my grandmother yelled at me to stop kissing the flea bag. Nonna simply wiped my mouth clean, removed clumps of fur, and gently stroked my face with a thin hanky soaked with spit while I hummed and purred. We were a tribe of 2. I perched on Nonna's lap and traced the wrinkles around her mouth with my index finger. I leaned my back against her chest to burrow into her radiant warmth. She was the brightest star in my sky, and I was content to run around her in circles like a spastic comet. The trip was erasing my mother's perma-frown. She was gentle with me, taking my hand to help me down the cobblestone streets, holding tight while we crossed the piazza together, shielding me from the cold. I was used to my mother pulling sharply, yanking me downstairs so hard I would fall or land in a heap at her feet. I was always underfoot, in the way, a nuisance. In Bonneifro, my mother combed my hair with a tenderness I'd never experienced. She fastened barrettes and gave in to pigtail requests without losing her temper. It was a long winter visit, a month and a half. There was a feeling of tranquility, a temporary truce between my parents, and everyone was on their best behavior. In the neighboring village of Cascalenda, my grandmother bought me a necklace with a pendant of the Sacred Heart, more protection. She made meals of pasta and chickpeas over the hearth in a tiny cauldron. The glow of the burning wood was bewitching. Every night, the dark of the countryside closed in while we sat safe and warm in a semicircle by the fire. I cuddled up next to my grandmother and basked in her comforting, woolly old presence, the opposite of my abrasive young mother, a brilliant willow pad personality, who scorned love and scoured any affection from her life. La Befana, the crooked-nosed crone who flew around on her broomstick on the eve of the Epiphany, left toys with my grandmother, a tiny copper pot, a miniature coffee bean grinder, and a small brass fire pit. I stirred imaginary chestnuts in the pot and made espresso for everyone. My father threw back his pretend espresso in one gulp. Very nice. My mother ignored the invisible cup and saucer placed in front of her. My grandmother sipped and smiled. Good. Good if she learns how to make her future husband happy now, my grandfather said. On our last night in Bonefro, my mother's parents and some old family friends came by to pay their respects and say their goodbyes. I stayed awake as long as I could, wishing morning would never come. I followed my grandmother around like an orphan duckling, not letting her out of my sight. My grandmother's presence, her love and kindness, softened an ache in my chest, healed a rift in my world. I wanted to stay in this cozy space and comfortable place forever, like a princess, falling asleep for 100 years in a fairy tale kingdom, surrounded by the familiar, no longer a foreigner. No one knows that my grandmother will be dead soon, time flying faster than a jumbo jet chasing the last rays of sunlight above the Mediterranean. In 3 years, a month before my first communion and our reunion in the New World, she will wake up one morning, slower, weaker, her joints creaking, and by nightfall she will be gone. Her absence will haunt my life. At the airport in Rome, we stood alone together, my mother and father and I, watched the suitcases moving along the conveyor belt, 3 of us like dejected magi, going home to a country where I was a citizen and my parents were not. On the flight back to Canada, I was shy and subdued. I hummed a melody to myself, "You Came Down from the Stars," an Italian Christmas carol. My mother pinched my arm to shush me. A stewardess leaned over to shutter the oval window and blocked out the night sky. Thank you very much, Eufemia. We will have time for questions at the end. And now I'd like to introduce Rosetta ROSATI. Rosetta ROSATI immigrated to Canada in the late 50s at age 11. She went to Marymount High School in Montreal and later studied finance. In the late 70s, she returned to Italy with her husband Enrico and pursued a career in banking. She is president of l'Università delle Tre Età, Unitre Siziano, and she lives in Pavia. Welcome, Rosetta ROSATI.
Thank you, Licia, and I really am honored to be here, and thanks to Licia that introduced me to this association, and I was able now to be here today. Thank you. Oggi la mia storia, My Soul Roots, è un po' una storia di ritorno, di andare avanti e indietro dal Canada, della mia famiglia. Grazie. In one of our last conversations before she died, my mother Biondina had spoken in her pleasant Italian-English Calabrese mixture. The house, la casa, where I was born was in Sault Ste. Marie, in Ontario. In the back, we had a tiny garden. Così bello, it was so nice. Giacomo, your grandfather, had planted a baby fir tree and a small maple tree at opposite corners. I was sure that on other occasions Mother had given me more details, but I remember them vaguely, all remaining hidden in some remote shelf of my memory. Mom's mom, my nonna, had returned to Calabria in 1924 with her 5 children, leaving my nonno Giacomo in Canada. My mother, the eldest of 3 sisters, was 8 years old. She often used to comment on her mother's state of mind at their departure from Canada. She was happier in her homeland. She could finally breathe. My family, following my mom's desire, had later moved to Montreal. At retirement age, she returned back to Italy, but only half of her family repatriated. Italy is now my home, where I live with my husband and where my daughter was born. I tried to rummage through my brain for more details, but it was useless. I found only fog. The date of my departure was approaching, and darkness still reigned in my mind. I was not going on a business trip around the world. That time had passed. This was different. It was my sentimental journey. I wanted, I needed, I craved to rediscover my roots in Canada. I prayed, Caramama, I need to know, please help me. Day after day, I worked on organizing my handwritten notes, listed dates, places, names, added details. Everything I had collected was to make things clear, lift the fog from the passing of more than 100 years. Many details were still missing, and I did not want to overlook anything. The tiniest bit of information could make the difference. I had an insatiable desire to discover, search, empathize, breathe that air. Mama, look at this photo. It reminds me of the house my grandfather used to talk about. Could it be the one? Asked my clear-headed daughter. She wanted to help, even though she failed to understand my dear need to travel to Sault Ste. Marie. Incredulous, I looked at her as she handed me a journal of architecture that listed wooden prefabricated houses typical of buildings in Canada. Nonna Biondina told you about the house where she was born, and you remember such details as so well. I was astonished. The family history had skipped to my generation. I remember clearly. She told me it was a villa, and I went, wow. But then she corrected herself that it was a small villa, like ours in Milan, but built out of wood with 2 floors. Then she told me, and I remember this well, that from the street a driveway led to the main entrance, and by going up a few steps, you enter directly into the main lobby. Don't you remember what she used to tell us? That for Christmas they decorated a small pine tree that Nonna's dad had planted in the garden. He was your nonno and my great-grandfather. I was saddened that I did not, but grateful to my daughter Jennifer for having guarded these details, now so precious to me. She had been very close to my mother, her nonnina, as she affectionately called her. She loved her deeply. During her study breaks from university, Jennifer would take the train or plane from Milan to Calabria to be with nonnina and share moments of relaxation. It was particularly during these times that she spoke of her experiences in Canada, where her parents had emigrated and where she had been born along with her 4 brothers. It has been during one of these visits, on a night with a full moon, sitting on the balcony overlooking the Ionian Sea, that Jennifer came away with the secret player against the evil eye in Malocchio, entrusted to her so that she could pass it on to her children. I had not received the same gift from my mother. I had always boosted my non-superstitious nature. Now I realize how important it was to have had that trust as my daughter had from my mother. I envied and I admire Jennifer because her recollections had given more color, adding yet another brushstroke to the canvas I was going to paint, now nearly blank. I needed work, much was still missing. With that determination, I began my research. I knew that all street maps were available online for Canadian cities, and I began examining them starting from the year 1911. Long and tedious work accompanied my trepidation and the deep desire to discover and trace the path of lives that I did not know, but which belonged to me all the same and had shaped my character and my deepest feelings. With each click of the microfilmed pages of the street directory, with every street, Bainbridge, Estelle, Henrietta Avenue, Ruth Swartz, Wellington Street, and the house and house numbers listed, I unveiled the last and first names of the owner or tenant. Fascinated, I fantasized about going into their homes. I scrutinized the members of the family. I speculated on their origin. Nicholas Whalen, Leonard Burr, Jos Mancuso, Jos Magossi, Chas Rossi. Who were these people? Had they known my grandparents? Their children, their grandchildren, and great-grandchildren? Where are they all now? Where do they live today? Where did you live, grandfather? Which alley did your children play? My research list lasted entire nights, while years of the 20th century slowly went by. It was already midnight when I started consulting the pages of the 1916 street directory. Letter A to R had taken me 1 whole hour. At the letter S, I felt the need for a hot tea. I was hoping it would relax my abdominal muscles, which were becoming increasingly tense. 1916 was an important year. On May 25th, my mother had seen light in a house in the Algoma district of Sault Ste. Marie. I treasured a copy of her birth certificate. But in which house? On what street? Why was it so important to find out? What deep-seated pain did I want to placate through my research by defining all the contours of my roots? Was it perhaps the need to reconcile with my indifference, heal some of my remorse for not having asked or talked more with my mother about her childhood? She had lived in such a special place, but I had never said to her, "Mama, I'll take you on a journey to Canada." To Sault Ste. Marie, to visit the places where you were born, and if it still exists, we would try to find the home of your childhood together. I could have given her so many hugs, I could have told her so many things. Now it was too late. They will remain forever in my heart. The tea wormed my stomach, and I felt immediate relief. I had already consulted the first pages with street names having the letter S, and I remembered street names which had appeared in the directory the previous year. Some streets, though, had more street numbers. Evidently, construction was booming in Sault Ste. Marie, which had become a city in 1912, and I sensed the growth year after year as my research unfolded. It was now past midnight. I was exhausted. I longed to finish the letter S on the directory. A new street name appeared. It gave me a jolt. I remember well that this street name was not there on the 1915 directory. Schaefer Avenue was definitely a new street, with only a few house numbers. I spread out my pine from the back of the chair, and my nose almost touched the PC monitor. I zoomed in on the names of these residents while I imagined the road still unpaved, lawns not yet green, houses with front doors wide open to allow the coming and going of men moving furniture. I quickly browsed the street number 681, then 685. I rubbed my eyelids. My heart began to beat faster. I removed my eyeglasses, put them on again. Schaefer Avenue, number 685, Jazz Talarico. I got up from my desk, I went down to the kitchen and took out my favorite rum-filled chocolates. I unwrapped them one by one and relished the strong taste of liqueur and the sweetness of the cherry. I returned, straightened, read again. 685, Schaefer Avenue, Jazz Talarico. Does Jazz stand for James, and James stand for Giacomo? Giacomo Talarico, my grandfather. It was him. He had lived with his family in a house just built. I imagined my grandmother holding my newborn baby, my mother. Suddenly, the name Talarico became an oval-shaped golden plaque on a white front door. The house I envisioned had become real. The Talaricos, my family, had lived behind that golden plaque. Now, all the details that my daughter had given me, a villa on 2 floors, a driveway leading to the porch, as well as a rear garden, began to take shape in my mind. But was this really the house I was looking for? And what if the name was simply an homonym? Had I really found the house where my family's Canadian venture had begun? I slumped on my bed. I was exhausted. Tomorrow, Google Maps would come to my aid. The satellite picture would allow me to explore Schaefer Avenue and its houses. I had another bout of insecurity. Did I really need to know if the house at 685 was still there? Other fatalistic thoughts were lurking. Too many years had passed. The house would be no more. Wooden houses do not last centuries and are often torn down. I told myself that the next day I would email John, my friend in Toronto. He was a former real estate agent and would advise me well. From Toronto's Lester B. Pearson Airport, early in the morning, I boarded Porter Airlines. Within 2 hours, I was there. John had contacted James Clark, a realtor in Sault Ste. Marie, who would be my guide. I texted him my flight number and my estimated time of arrival. The minute I got off the plane in Sault Ste. Marie, I saw a young man colorfully dressed, waiting at the arrivals, holding a sign with my anglicized name. "Hello, Mr. Clark." He was polite and talkative, and I felt at ease with him. He reminded me of an old high school classmate back in Montreal. His car was parked just outside, and within minutes we were in the city center. My heart began to have the usual gasp. I lowered my head to the window to peek at street names: Bainbridge, Estelle, Henrietta, all street names that had become very familiar to me. The minute we reached the bottom of Wellington Boulevard, we turned right. "We are almost there," he said. "I know," I nodded, my mental road map unfolding in front of my eyes. Schaefer Avenue was the second road on the left. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. It's a very old house, and I was not able to find the original construction papers and the name of the proprietor. It had been vacant and for sale for quite a while." Words escaped me without thinking. "If I'm lucky, shortly, I will be able to give you the missing information." Mr. Clark turned and looked at me with curiosity. Why would a fine Italian lady come all the way from Milan to buy this old shack? That's what he must have been thinking. In dreamy slow motion, the numbers of the homes slid slowly in front of my eyes. The side that interested me was the one with the odd numbers: 679, 681, 685. We parked in front of the house number 685. On the sides of the driveway, two fallow fields devoid of plants served as borders. On the right side, a for sale sign was stuck into the high grass. 4 steps led to a patio with access to the house. "Can I see the garden, please?" "It's in the back. Let's go in. We can access the garden from the kitchen on the ground floor." The hardwood floors creaked under our feet. A musty smell permeated the air. The room had not been aired for some time. Mr. Clark then opened the door leading to the rear garden. I shuddered. A huge fir tree, taller than the house, covered the right side. In the left corner, a giant Canadian maple touched the pine with its branches, as if it wanted to become one with it. Then nothing else. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, the words that up to that point had been hidden in fog appeared as new and distinct memories. I used to play with my rag doll in the back garden under the maple tree that my father had planted. Under the maple tree, under the shade of the thorny tree, I played and talked to my rag doll. I needed nothing else. Finding the house was what I needed to balance my lopsided existence. I had felt like a forgiveness from above. "Mr. Clark, I love this house. It was built in 1916, and its first owner was Mr. Giacomo Tallarico, known as Jack. He was my grandfather. He lived here with his family, and I would love to be the new owner of this house." A strange wind gust came out of nowhere and made the tree sway low towards me. It was a sign. My mother approved.
Thank you very much, Rosetta ROSATI. And now it's my honor, really, to introduce to you Anthony Mark Pignataro, and to read 3 poems, possibly, from his book, From Under a Linden Tree. As I said earlier this morning, Anthony had submitted a proposal to read here at this conference, but he passed away on March 26, 2016. We were in contact with his daughter, Danielle Pignataro, who has sent us, she sent me a text to read at the conference and a copy of the book. She also sent some photos with his bio at the back. If you're interested, I have a few. I don't have any copies of the book except for this one, but if you are interested, I could put you in touch with Danielle Pignataro. So Anthony Mark Pignataro was born in Rende in 1949 and immigrated to Canada in 1952. He enjoyed a 32-year career as an elementary school teacher for the Toronto Catholic District School Board. Anthony was ordained a permanent deacon in 1992 and served as a volunteer chaplain at Santa Maria House, a group home for young women, for 15 years. In 2005, Anthony received a diploma in spiritual direction from Regis College and was inducted as a member of Alpha Sigma Nu, the honor society of Jesuit institutions of higher education. Anthony was part of the Italian-Canadian literary community in Toronto during the 1970s and was published in 2 of its seminal figures, by two of its seminal figures, Pier Giorgio di Cicco and Caroline Morgan di Giovanni. After his poem The Immigrant appeared in Mosaico magazine in 1975, Di Cicco invited Anthony to submit the piece for Roman Candles, which was published in 1978, the first anthology of Italian-Canadian poetry. 6 years later, Di Giovanni gave us Italian-Canadian Voices. For Anthony, the craft of writing, poetry, music, reflections has been an avocation from 16 years of age. Of this he writes, to be engaged with the shaping of insights and observations, to be possessed of those magical moments of creation and new awareness as the poem unfolds, to participate in the bringing into being of a work that both edifies and delights, offers the deepest of satisfaction and meaning. He published his first book from Under a Linden Tree in 2011. And Anthony is survived by his wife Laura, his son Michael, his daughter Danielle, and his son-in-law Christopher Crowe. One of his last poems, I'm going to read a very short poem here. The title is I Am Here. I am here, waiting, a traveler having just set foot on a new shore, looking inward, wondering which way to go. It is light that welcomes me still. It is light I find. So that was a poem that Danielle said that was not published, and now I will read 3 poems from his book. Now and Once. Once I saw the one amongst the many. Now I see the many that form the one. Once, to know myself, I spoke of differences and pushed away my fellows. Now I look to find myself in the common thread. Once I saw the petal and the leaf. Now I see how flowers bend the stem and branches shape the tree. Once I saw season in a color, first yellow, then summer green. Now, in red berries, I see summer harbor autumn, and winter white hide the buds of spring. Once I saw what played to catch my eye, what spiraled, spread, or circled. Now I see what's gently blended in, brown and purple intertwined, the dying reed falling on the new, and the field that largely holds them all. In any season, the one and the many are held. At any juncture, the one and the many roads await. Once I rushed to become what I was dreaming. That gave way to knowing I already am what I am called to become. The end of evening. The end of evening, the end of day, the end of season, end of the year. Autumn brings fruitfulness and longing. The sight of geese over lakes, practicing flight, brings stirrings of loss and of the chill to come. I ache for what's past, the lifetimes of life's seasons. And in the husks of all that's flown, be it insect, seed, or time, I take momentary refuge. A task completed, a lesson learned, a memory of friendship shared. What I become and what others will say of me. But here I cannot sleep or rest, for there is where I have still to get to. Another sunrise, another sunset, another day. And so I join with those beating wings now ascending over dark water, and yearn for that country that in the dying light calls me to return. And finally, a very short poem, the epilogue. I shall hate to leave this place. I shall hate to leave this place, to close my eyes to it. And not because I fear what lies beyond, but because I love it so. I love this green earth and all that grows and moves upon it. The singing birds, the flowering trees, I shall hate to leave this place. He was born in 1949 and he died in 2016. So, we have time for questions for our two authors who are present. Thank you very much for both of you for reading. And I open up the floor to you. We welcome questions in italiano, in inglese, in dialetto, in francese. Aldo Colangelo?
Grazie. Lo faccio in italiano,
Sì.
però se non è chiara la voce lo faccio in inglese. Volevo sapere, a Montréal mi sembra, forse mi metto qui così la voce va un po'.
Qual è questo?
No,
Sì.
vabbè, grazie, molto grazie. Ho l'impressione che gli italiani in Italia, in Montréal. Grazie, scusa tu. Dunque, l'impressione è che gli italiani a Montréal hanno una caratteristica e forse anche un peso culturale maggiore di quello che noi abbiamo a Toronto. Perché? Perché hanno logicamente l'inglese e il francese o il francese e l'inglese, o se vogliamo il québécois più che il francese, perché ci sono anche queste caratteristiche. Allora mi domando se nella vostra esperienza di quelli che sono di Montréal, o meglio del Québec, se avete notato, per la vostra esperienza personale o di lavoro, se gli italiani come me, venuti da adulti a Montréal, hanno scelto, non i figli, ma loro, di esprimersi nel québécois, nell'inglese, oppure in tutte e due quello che sia. Grazie.
Grazie Aldo Colangelo per la domanda. Dovrei dire che Eufemia Fantetti è di Toronto, so I don't know if you can address that question.